Hello, hello, everybody. In case if you have forgotten, in the last part, in case you have forgotten, in the last parts, there was a character named Addie. She appeared in the last two parts. She appeared in two chapters, I think. The third chapter, Allo nach Rome, and the sixth chapter, Allo aus Afrika. And yeah, and I wasn't able to do a summarized English translation for what she spoke in the sixth chapter because when I recorded on part two, it was late as hell when I recorded it, so I was really tired and I didn't get a chance to record it and whatnot. Um, I'll be doing that. I'll be giving you guys a summarized English translation for what the German girl spoke in the sixth chapter, as all her lines were in German. In a nutshell, she basically she begins comment to herself about like basically commenting and remarking to herself how much of a wonderful time she's having at the triumphs when Valens, a patrician tribune and Roman nobleman, and a Roman nobleman, he shows up and he asks he essentially asks her just like a few questions on like the triumph, like such as like how elaborate like Caesar's triumph actually is, and she actually explains in detail of how actually batshit elaborate, luxurious, and how absolute and et cetera of like how Caesar planned his triumphs. And trust me, yeah, it's really bad. It is genuinely batshit insane. But yeah, yeah. She also says that Julius Caesar has also brought exotic animals from the far edges of known Africa and across Asia. Um, So some of these exotic, so she basically lists where these exotic animals came from. Numidia, Mauritania, or the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, Libya, I believe. I think Libya, um, Persia, Afghanistan, and the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia. Um, and like mainland Southeast Asia and like parts of maritime Southeast Asia. Like I was originally going to say the whole region of like specific parts of Southeast Asia like Thailand, Champa, aka modern day Vietnam, Cambodia, um Sri Lanka. Well, technically it was called Ceylon back then. Um And I was originally going to mention the Malay Archipelago, which is the Malay Peninsula, the Indonesian islands, and the Philippine Islands. But technically the Romans did know and they did actually explore to the Malay Peninsula and some parts of the Indonesian islands such as Sumatra, but they didn't really know too much about like Indonesia, further east, and they didn't really know much about the Philippines. Albeit they did know a little bit of the Philippines from like from second source Indian and Chinese sources. But I decided to just like say like Southeast Asia in general, like the whole region. And she also states lots of, and I'm when I mean lots, I mean lots, tons of, not lots, tons of actually, tons of luxurious goods from across Africa and Asia, such as all those regions I explained, but also mainland China, or as the Romans call it, Sinea, I think. Now, when I mean mainland China, I mean the Han Dynasty at this time. But I'm also technically referring to Xinjiang and Tibet, which are part of the modern day country of China. Now when I refer to sorry, I just paused a little. Now when I refer to mainland China and just like the land of China in general, I refer to the modern day country of the People's Republic of China, which is a geopolitical, yeah, 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 but also generally excluding Hong Kong and Macau. Now, despite that geopolitical term, which I stated, refers to the PRC, excluding Taiwan. Not, oops, sorry. I mean excluding Hong Kong and Macau. Taiwan is a different country, by the way. In this context, I believe now hold on. In this no, not believe, a fact. In this context, mainland China technically also refers to Macau and Hong Kong as well. Although Hong Kong and Macau didn't even exist at this time, they definitely didn't exist yet in Julius Caesar's time. Um, the lands that would have become those two regions were actually used by the Romans a lot to get to China during the Han Dynasty era and the Free Kingdoms period. So yeah, so that's a cool little fact. She also basically states, just basically overall, like, the triumphs are going to last for like 4 days, and the rest of the games are going to continue for like a week to like 2 weeks. And Caesar has also already brought those already done 4 other multi-day triumphs similar to this one in Roman Africa, um Gaul, Ptolemaic Egypt, and the Kingdom of Pontus, which is like a small Hellenistic kingdom. It's like a Hellenistic kingdom along the Black Sea, along the coast of like northern Turkey, by the way. Um, yeah, and she basically says, take care, and she basically tells Valens to take care and have a nice day. Yeah, basically she's a sweet, compassionate, and really helpful and useful foreign migrant girl. She also states briefly again that she's from Augusta Vindicurium, aka the modern day city of Augsburg in Germany's Bavaria region. and which was at this time part of the Roman province of Rhaetia. And she basically says that she's going to be staying with her family for the whole like 1-2 week period before going back to Augsburg. And yeah, then she says then she basically says take care and have a nice day to Valens. So yeah. And with that out of the way, let's begin with the rest of the story so far. And without further ado, let's begin. Chapter 7. In Defense of the Republic. Addie vanished into the swirling, cheering crowds of the Roman marketplace, swallowed by the noise, color, and devotion of the triumph. For a long moment, Valens did not move. He stood where she had left him, his face held in the same rigid mask of patrician composure, though the expression had begun to crack at the edges. Around him, Rome roared. The city seemed drunk on Caesar's name. Every voice, every banner, every flower basket thrown through a statue. Every painted board bearing the dictator's face seemed to press against him like a physical weight. Julia stood beside him, her gaze following the place where Addie had disappeared. The young provincial girl had been harmless, cheerful even. She had spoken with no malice, no circulation, and yet no understanding of the horror she had just described. To Addie, Caesar's triumph was a marvel. The animals, the coins, the games, the banquets, the crowds, the elephants, the lake built for staged naval slaughter, all of it was magnificent. All of it was Rome at its greatest. To Valens and Julia, it was something else entirely. It was proof that Caesar had not merely conquered his enemies, he had conquered imagination itself. Below the high monuments and shaded porticos, I think I probably mispronounced that. The streets of the lower district were swelling with the chaotic rhythmic drum of the festival. Plebeians moved in droves, their voices carrying upwards in a discordant harmony of laughter, cheap wine, and praise for the man of the hour. Caesar! The name rolled across the stones. Caesar! Caesar! It was not just a chant, it was a heartbeat, a sickness, a fever that had infected the entire city. Julia's jaw tightened. They're cheering for him, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Listen to them. You hear it everywhere. Valens slowly turned his head toward her. His face had hardened into an expression she had not seen she had not seen since the dark days before the purges. They cheered just as loudly when Pompey paraded through the streets. He said, they wept when his banners were raised. They climbed rooftops to see him pass. They lifted their children into the air and called him the guardian of Rome. His eyes moved over the crowds with open disgust. Now they wash his blood from their hands in the fountains and beg Caesar for scraps. They have no memory. Julia spat. They have no loyalty. They are animals waiting for whoever throws the largest handful of grain. A group of nearby men stumbled past them, laughing loudly, their tunics stained with wine. One of them carried a crude wooden tablet painted with Caesar's face. Another wore a riaf crookedly over his brow and shouted something about free grain, free coins, and the greatness of the dictator. Julia watched him pass with a look of cold revulsion. Valens followed her gaze. Then something in him settled, not calmed, settled, like a blade finding its place in the hand. Then let us remind them who they used to serve, Valen said. Julia looked at him. For the first time that afternoon, she smiled. It was not a pleasant smile, though. Together, they moved away from the marketplace stalls and pushed into the broader street beyond the plaza. The transition from the dense, colorful chaos of the Triumph Market to the suffocating heat of the Roman streets was a physical shock. The air smelled of roasted meats, spilled ale, not incest, incense, and trampled flowers. Garlands of ivy and laurel hung from every awning. Crimson banners bearing Caesar's name fluttered from prominent archways. Painted signs had been tied to balconies. Children ran barefoot through the streets, waving scraps of red cloth as if they were military standards. Everywhere, Caesar's image stared back at them, painted on boards, carved into temporary shrines, sketched on cheap panels, stamped on commemorative tokens, raised on polished stone. Valens and Julia moved through the crowd like ghosts from an older Rome. Their dark, heavy traveling cloaks were pulled tight to conceal their finer tunics. They were tribunes of the old order, or what remained of it, and walking among the ecstatic masses felt like wading through enemy territory. They soon reached a wide, bustling intersection where the neighborhood celebration had reached its fevered center. At the heart of the thoroughfare stood several massive, freshly polished stone statues of Julius Caesar, erected by overzealous magistrates eager to curry favor with the new dictator. The statues had been draped in magnificent purple capes, rich and expensive, the color of royalty and the color of kings. It was a blatant defiance of everything the Republic claims to be. A circle of cobblers, carpenters, butchers, and street vendors had formed around the base of the nearest monument. Many were drunk. Some sang crude songs praising Caesar's victories. Others toasted his name as if he were a god who had personally filled their cups. Look at them, Julia whispered, her hand instinctively drifting toward the concealed dagger beneath her sash. They dance on Pompey's grave. Valens did not answer. The sheer hypocrisy of the crowds ignited something primal within him. He pushed his way through the outer ring of the commoners, his large frame forcing a path through the packed bodies. Julia followed closely at his heel, her eyes scanning the faces around them, the cheap wine staining their lips, the unearned joy shining in their eyes, the lazy satisfaction of people who had sold memory for spectacle. Hey, make way! A heavily intoxicated butcher yelled as Valens bumped past him, causing the man to drop a clay goblet. Today is a holiday. Smile, friends. Caesar has conquered. Valens stops dead in his tracks. Slowly, he turned to face the man. He pulled back his hood, just enough to reveal the sharp, aristocratic lines of his jaw and the cold fury in his eyes. The butcher's easy smile faltered. The air changed. Conquered whom? Valens asked. His voice cut through the localized voice of the crowd like a blade. The butcher blinked. What? Did he conquer the Gauls today? Valens continued. Did he defeat a foreign king? Tell me, citizen, whose blood ran in the streets of Parsalis? The surrounding laughter began to fade. Valen stepped closer. It was Roman blood. Your brothers, your sons, your countrymen, and you drink to it? The circle of commoners grew quiet, the sound of celebration shrinking around them. Julia stepped forward, her voice ringing out across the cobblestones, filled with a biting aristocratic disdain, made several plebeians instinctively shrink back. You mechanical slaves, she said. You idle creatures. Have you forgotten Pompey? A few men exchanged uneasy glances. Julia's eyes burned. Have you forgotten the man who cleared the streets for you? The man who brought wealth to these very gates? You used to climb to the highest rooftops, holding your children in your arms, just to catch a glimpse of his chariot. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. A few men looked down at their boots. For one brief moment, shame moved through some of them. Julia saw it and pressed harder. And now, she continued, her voice rising into a crescendo of pure contempt. You put on your best attire, you pluck flowers for a holiday, you strew them in the path of the man who comes in triumph over Pompey's blood? The silence tightened. Go to your houses, Julia snapped. Fall upon your knees. Pray to the gods to hold back the plague that must fall upon such ingratitude. For a moment, the crowd was paralyzed by the raw, venomous authority of the two tribunes. But shame was weak, wine was stronger, and Caesar's name was stronger still. A murmur of dissent began to ripple through the back crowds. Caesar gave us grain, someone shouted from the safety of the crowd. Caesar pays our rent, another voice cried. Caesar owns your souls, Valens roared back. He did not wait for their reaction. With explosive, unbridled rage, Valens strutted toward the primary statue of Caesar and stepped onto its stone plinth. The commoners gasped, backing away as if he had committed a physical act of sacrilege. Valens reached up and grabbed the edge of the expensive purple cape draped over the statue's shoulders. The fabric was fine silk, imported at public expense, a symbol of the creeping monarchy they all pretended not to see. His fingers tightened. Then he pulled. The threads ground. He pulled harder, dragging down with all his weight. With a loud, violent tearing sound, the brilliant purple cape ripped free from the stone torso and collapsed in a crumpled heap at the base of the monument. A woman screamed. Several men shouted. Julia moved beside him. Without hesitation, Take off the crowns, she commanded. She reached up and used the hilt of her dagger to strike the laurel wreaths and golden fillets hanging from the statue's brow. One by one, they broke loose and clattered into the dirt below. Strip the images, she shouted. Let no image be hung with Caesar's trophies. The plebeians watched in absolute horror as the symbols of their new idol were defiled and cast aside like garbage. Valens stood tall on the stone plinth, his chest heaving, his face contorted with disgust as he looked down upon the bewildered crowd. Get out, he bellowed. His voice echoed fiercely off the surrounding stone buildings as he stretched his arms wide, dominating the space. Go home to your hovels. The festival is over. Break up these crowds, or by the gods, you will find out that the laws of Rome still have teeth for traitors. Go! Julia echoed. Standing firmly beside her, her glare passed over the remaining commoners with scorching finality. You are nothing to us. Your loyalty is a joke. Get out of our sight. The crowd stood frozen, trapped between growing resentment and the ancient, terrifying authority the tribunes still possessed. Valens, the tribunes still possessed. Valens and Julia remained planted at the foot of the stripped statue, refusing to yield an inch of ground. For a few breaths, it seemed as if the old realms might still command obedience. Then the silence began to fracture. It cracked like thin ice beneath sudden weight. Valens and Julia stood elevated on the stone plinth, their expressions frozen in aristocratic defiance. The sheer terror they had initially struck into the ground began to evaporate into the warm afternoon air. Shame, when mixed with cheap wine and a newfound sense of populist pride, made for a volatile thing. From the middle of the crowd, the cobbler, who had been leading the songs, stepped forward. He was not cowering anymore. He wiped a streak of sweat from his forehead and pointed a thick, calloused finger up at Valens. The laws of Rome? The cobbler barked, his voice carrying over the murmurs. Which laws would those be, tribune? The ones that keep us starving in our shops while your precious Senate debated how many triumphs Pompey deserved? A murmur of agreement moved through the crowd. The cobbler stepped closer. The ones that let the patricians buy up the countryside while our sons bleed in foreign dirt for nothing? A wave of fierce, approving shouts rippled through the gathering. The tension shifted instantly. The crowd was no longer a disorganized mass of revelers. It had become a It had become a single angry organism turning its gaze upward. The butcher, still bruised and humiliated from being threatened earlier, pushed his way to the front. His eyes were wide with furious, reckless energy. You talk to us of ingratitude, he roared, spitting onto the cobblestones near Julia's boots. We gave Pompey our youth, we gave him our taxes, and what did he leave us? A city blockaded, grain fleets intercepted, and a senate that ran away the second a real general marched on the Rubicon. He fled, a carpenter shouted from the back. Pompey left Rome to rot, and Caesar saved it. Julia stepped closer to the edge of the plinth, her knuckles white around the hilt of her hidden dagger. You blind fools, she shouted at them, trying to pierce through the growing din. Caesar did not save Rome, he conquered it. You are cheering for your own chains. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Crap. Sorry about that. Sorry. My laptop, my brother's laptop that I'm using, it moved a little. Sorry. Caesar did not save Rome. He conquered it. You are cheering for your own chains. You trade liberty for a fistful of coins and a bowl of mush. Then let us eat our mush in peace, a woman shouted. She hurled a bruised piece of fruit. It narrowly missed Julia's shoulder and shattered against the stone statue behind her. The act of defiance broke whatever lingering hesitation the plebeians had left. The verbal assault became a roar. The commoners pressed forward, surging against the base of the monument. The distance between the aristocratic tribunes and the working class of Rome vanished in an instant. Go back to your villas, the butcher yelled. His face flushed red as he stepped right up to the plinth, entirely unafraid of Valence's imposing frame. You think you're better than us because of the names of your grandfathers? Your republic was a playground for the rich. Caesar actually sees us. You are not tribunes of the people. Another voice bellowed from the sea of angry faces. You are just Pompey's ghosts. Go join him in the underworld. The insults rained down like stones. The crowd jeered now. mocking the dark traveling cloaks and severe, humorless expressions of the two patricians. A few younger men at the front began to slam their tools against the stone base, creating a deafening, rhythmic clatter that drowned out any attempt Valens or Julia made to speak. Valens looked over the sea of bared teeth, raised fists, and flushed faces. He was a soldier, and he knew the exact moment a crowd became a mob. There was no reasoning with them anymore. The authority of their office meant nothing to a populace that felt protected by the shadow of Julius Caesar. He caught Julia's eye. The sharp, fearless fury in her gaze was finally flickering with sober realization. If they stayed on this pedestal for another minute, the crowd would tear them down from it. We cannot hold the streets, Valens muttered from his breath. His voice was barely audible over the roaring chants of Caesar! Caesar! That had started up again, weaponized directly against them. I will not run from these dogs, Julia hissed back. Damn. But even as she said it, she instinctively took a half step back from the edge as a heavy clay fragment shattered near her feet. You will not have a choice if they swarm the plinth, Valen said firmly. He grabbed her upper arm, not waiting for her compliance, and forced her backwards off the stone monument into the narrow gap between the statue and the wall of the nearest building. As they dropped down from the plinth, relinquishing their high ground, the crowd let out a thunderous cheer of victory. It was a roar of pure derision. Look at them run! The butcher shouted, his voice triumphant. The great protectors of Rome! With the mob surging forward to reclaim the space around the defiled statue, Valens and Julia turned. Hold on, guys. Sorry. I missed the part. It was a roar of pure derision. Look at them run! The butcher shouted, his voice triumphant. The great protectors of Rome! The great protectors of Rome! With the mob surging forward to reclaim the space around the defiled statue, Valens and Julia turned. Spurred by the immediate danger of the encroaching crowd, they broke into a sprint, pushing past against the outer stragglers and diving headlong into the dark, narrow mouth of a secondary alleyway. Behind them, the furious mocking laughter of the plebeians echoed off the stone walls, chasing them into the shadows as the street festival reclaimed its chaotic, unstoppable momentum. Chapter 8. Britain before Caesar. October 19th, 45 BCE, late morning. Through the bustling cobblestone streets of Rome, a magnificent two-horse carriage navigated the crowds, its reins held firmly by a disciplined Roman legionary, acting as driver. This vessel was a plenitum, a luxurious, four-wheeled ceremonial carriage that stood as the absolute pinnacle of elite craftsmanship and patrician status. The vehicle's exterior was a rolling masterpiece, outfitted with finely engraved bronze sheet siding, richly painted wooden panels, and intricate tin medallions depicting legendary mythological figures. Inside, plush padded seats with carved armrests provided unparalleled comfort, utilizing an advanced engineering marvel of the age. A leather-strapped suspension was designed to absorb the jarring shock of Rome's famed basalt-paved roads, drawn by an adorned team of horses whose harness sparkled in the autumn sun. Hold on, guys. Give me a moment, guys. Autumn sun. Such a vehicle was a rare sight. reserved strictly by law and custom for priestesses, brides, and high-ranking patricians. Just give me a moment, guys. Oh yeah, inside the rumbling cabin, Julius Caesar sat opposite of his wife, Calpurnia. As the daughter of the illustrious former consul and senator Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesonius, I think I butchered that, Calpurnia carried herself with the quiet, structural dignity expected of the Republic's highest aristocratic elite. The iron-trimmed wheels ground heavily against the stone as they cut through the wide city avenues, bound eventually for the sacred autumn festival of the Armulistrium. Along the way, they were scheduled. Sorry, guys, hold on. Just give me a moment, sorry. Alright, sorry. Along the way, they were scheduled to rendezvous at the Circus Maximus with a few of Caesar's critical political allies. The sharp orator Marcus Junius Brutus, the volatile plebeian tribune Publius Servilius Cascalungus, and the calculating senator and general Gaius Cassius Longinus. For several minutes, husband and wife sat in a heavy contemplative silence. The rhythmic swaying of the pilentum fell in the space between them. Caesar finally broke the lull, clearing his throat as the afternoon lights flickered around the stark, severe planes of his face. Do you want to talk about anything right now? Caesar asked, leaning forward slightly. His voice dropped into a more intimate register. We can discuss whatever is on your mind before we meet Brutus. We still have a decent amount of time before the carriage arrives. Calpurnia possessed. Oh, sorry. Calpurnia possessed a striking command and presence. Hold on, sorry. Sorry. She was relatively tall, her frame exhibiting a subtle athletic strength. Hold on, guys. Sorry. I'm sorry for getting lost. So sorry. Um, well, oh yeah. Sorry, I missed the whole last sentence. Sorry, guys. Calpurnia offered a composed, elegant nod. Why, of course. At 33 years old, at 33 years old, Calpurnia possessed a striking command and presence. She was relatively tall, her frame exhibiting a subtle athletic strength characterized by broad shoulders and long, capable arms. Her short, thick brunette hair was cut in bouncy, healthy layers that stopped cleanly at the nape of her neck. Beautifully framing her smooth, heart-shaped face. Her skin was also fair and immaculate, contrasting with the gentle depth of her bright brown eyes. Every layer of her attire spoke to her high station and unassailable modesty. Closest to her skin, she wore a basic knee-length linen slip known as a sabukula, Over this sat her primary tunica, an ankle-length dress woven from a premium blend of fine wool and imported Egyptian linen, pinned at the sleeves with small, expertly crafted gold and silver brooches. Atop the tunic sat the stula, the ultimate traditional symbol of respectable married Roman matron. The loose, sleeveless overdress hung from her shoulders by delicate straps, the double belted to create a perfect, elegant drape. One tight cord, cingulum, sat directly beneath her bust, while a broader, looser belt rested at her hips. For the outdoor journey, she had draped a heavy woolen cloak, a palla, over her shoulders, completing her ensemble with modest, finely stitched leather shoes. Caesar, by contrast, presented a radically different silhouette. He had bypassed the traditional civilian toga entirely for the day's festivities, electing instead to wear his full military command and armor, a gleaming testament to his legions, his conquests, and the absolute power he now wielded over Rome. Calpurnia adjusted the fold of her palla, her calm gaze locking onto her husband's intense eyes. Caesar broke the silence again, his mind driven back to his past campaigns. In the course of the Gallic Wars, I briefly invaded Britain twice, first in 55 BCE and again in 54 BCE. On the first occasion, I took only 2 legions, about 10,000 legionaries, along with minimal auxiliaries, cavalry, and 100 transport ships. As such, we achieved a little beyond a tense landing on the coast of Kent. The second invasion, however, was a massive undertaking. We sailed with 800 ships, 5 legions totaling 25,000 legionaries. 2,000 cavalry, 600 transport ships, and 28 dedicated warships. He leaned back, a faint smile touching his lips. The force was so imposing that the Celtic Britons didn't even dare contest our landing, waited instead until we began to move inland. We eventually penetrated deep into Middlesex and crossed the Thames, forcing the British warlord Cassivellanius to pay tribute to Rome and setting up Mandubracius of the Trinovantes as our client king. My army and I then returned to Gaul, but found leaving a permanent garrison or officially annexing territory. I remember reading your dispatches to the Senate. Caesar nodded softly. I made sure to include detailed accounts of both campaigns in my Commentari de Bello Gallico. Caesar continued. They contain the earliest surviving significant eyewitness descriptions of the island's people, culture, and geography. In essence, it marks the beginning of the written history, or at least the proto-history of Great Britain. My first-hand account was written intentionally as a third-person narrative, detailing the brutal battles and complex intrigues that took place during the 9 years I spent fighting the Celtic and Germanic peoples who opposed Roman rule. Calpurnius smiled gently, raising a hand to pause him. Don't worry, husband. I know exactly what it is. You have spoken of it before, and I have read the commentaries in their entirety. I know you have, Caesar replied, inclining his head appreciatively. I just wanted to ensure the context was fresh in our minds. Now, for centuries, the classical world viewed the British Isles merely as a distant, semi-legendary land of tin, because it sits at the very edge of the known world, across a terrifying, untamed ocean. Many of our peers consider the place entirely mythical, a frontier shrouded in eternal fog and exaggerated travelers' tales. He shifted his weight, his armor clinking softly. In the early 5th century BCE, a Carthaginian navigator named Himilco explored the northwestern shores of Europe. His lost account, the Periplus of the Northern Sea, survives only in fragments, preserved by Pliny and Avienus. He sailed beyond the Pillars of Hercules, likely reaching Brittany, and possibly Britain itself. Later, in the 4th century BCE, the Greek geographer and astronomer Piephus of Massalia made a scientific voyage to northern Europe around 325 BCE. He was the first Mediterranean visitor to see and describe the Arctic, polar ice, the midnight sun, and the distant customs of the Celtic and Germanic tribes. Yet to many Romans, his reports were dismissed entirely as a hoax. Writers routinely insisted the islands simply did not exist. And yet you crossed the water and proved them wrong, Calpurnia said. We did, and our intelligence showed a surprisingly populated land, estimated between 1 and 4 million souls. Cultivation was far more widespread and organized. Settled farming and internal communication across the terrain was difficult. While most native settlements were built on high grounds and heavily fortified, we notice oppida, or fortified hilltop towns and settlements, have been sprung up on the lower grounds of the southeast, usually at river crossings. It suggests that trade is rapidly becoming vital to them. Commercial contact between Britain and the continent has steadily surged since our conquest of Transalpine Gaul back in 124 BCE. In fact, Italian wine is highly sought after there, imported via the Armorican Peninsula, and arriving at points like Hengistbury Head in Dorset. Caesar's eyes sharpened as he reached the core of his political assessment. From my accounts, the Belgia, a powerful confederation of tribes from northern Gaul, had previously conducted extensive raids on Britain. They established permanent settlements along the coastal areas. Within living memory, Diviciacus, the Belgian king of the Suissones, held sovereign power over territory in both Britain and Gaul. Calpurnia focused on him. Her interest peaked. To what extent does their influence truly reach inland, though? The coinage from the region tells us a fascinating, complicated story of tribal intrusion. Caesar explained, gesturing with his hand. The earliest Gallo-Belgic Celtic coins found on the islands date back to before 100 BCE, perhaps even as early as 150 BCE. These were struck in Gaul and are discovered mainly in Kent. However, later coins of an identical type were minted directly in Britain, scattered all along the southern coast as far west as Dorset. This proves that while Belgic military power remains heavily concentrated on the northeastern coast, their political influence has bled far deeper west and inland, largely through ambitious chieftains establishing overlordship over the native British population. Calpurnia asked, how did the invasions you lead fundamentally change how people viewed the islands of Britannia and Hibernia? Caesar smiled slightly before transitioning to seriousness and replied, before my campaigns to the islands, many Romans viewed Britain as an almost fantastical territory located at the edge of the inhabited world, known to some as Oceanus. Some scholars even dismissed accounts of the island as fiction. By launching 2 expeditionary campaigns, I proved that a populated landmass existed across the Channel, fundamentally altering the known geography of the Mediterranean-centric world. These new first-hand Roman accounts provided Romans with their first direct ethnographic and geographic details about the islanders, such as my records of the fierce British tribes and their war tactics. Instead of a united savage frontier, we realized Britain We realized Britain was a mosaic of tribal kingdoms with varying levels of societal developments, often possessing advanced agricultural networks and wealth. Rather than achieving permanent conquests, my expeditions brought Britain securely into the Roman sphere of influence for diplomacy. I established treaties, demanded hostages, and installed client kings. Just transformed how we as Romans viewed the island, shifting it from an unreachable mystery into a wild west of the empire that could be politically manipulated. Calpurnia replied, I'm understanding now, but you may continue so I have the full picture. Great job, Julius. Caesar briefly spoke. Thanks, before quickly transitioning. Since I published these invasions heavily in my Commentari de Bello Gallico, portraying the crossings as daring voyages beyond the known bounds of the empire to civilized barbarians, in Rome, my inability to cross the ocean and force native tribes to surrender was celebrated as a monumental triumph. Calpurnia replied, I see. Chapter 9 Armulistrium. The Armulistrium was one of the most sacred events in the ancient Roman calendar, a solemn yet triumphant festival dedicated to Mars, the god of war and agricultural guardian. Held annually on the 19th of October, it marked the formal end of military campaigning season. On this day, the weapons and shields of Rome's legions were ritually purified, with sacrificial blood and incense, before being stored away for the winter months. The centerpiece of the ritual began with the army assembling in the vast basin of the Circus Maximus. Their grim iron armor garlanded with vibrant autumn flowers. From there, citizens and soldiers alike would march up the hills of the Aventine Hill in the grand procession, lit by flickering torches, accompanied by sacrificial animals and the Sali, the famed leaping priests of Mars, who performed rhythmic clanking weapon dances. The term Armulistrium referred not just to the ritual itself, but also to the sprawling open space, sacred space, atop the Aventine, where the final blessings took place. By the time of Julius Caesar's dictatorship, the Circus Maximus was undergoing a massive, monumental transformation. No longer just a simple grassy valley used for racing, Caesar had recently expanded the track to a staggering 621 meters in length and 118 meters in width. He had commanded the construction of tiers of wooden bleachers and heavy stone vaults wrapping around almost the entire perimeter, creating a colossus capable of holding upwards of 150,000 spectators. The elongated U-shaped track was split down the center by a massive barrier known as the spina. Atop the central spine sat large wooden eggs and turning markers used to count down the 7 exhausting laps of a standard chariot race. Beneath the grand outer stands a bustling network of tabernae shops, food vendors, and taverns serves the daily needs of the Roman public. Caesar had even used this architecture to formalize Rome's strict social hierarchy, reserving the stone tiers closest to the track exclusively for senators, the middle section for the equestrian class, and the high wooden bleachers for the plebeians and the common citizens. After a 30-minute journey through the crowded avenues, the planitum rolled to a stop just outside the roaring perimeter of the stadium. Caesar and Calpurnia disembarked from the luxurious cabin, stepping out into the crisp afternoon air. Escorted by a small contingent of guards, they began walking through the vast outer arcades and bustling marketplaces surrounding the structure, keeping an eye out for Brutus, Casca, and Cassius. As they navigated the swarming crowds, Caesar let out a soft chuckle, adjusting the heavy set of his parade armor. I still find it remarkable how closely the Armulistrium followed my grand triumphs this year. The city has barely had time to clean the streets, and yet here we are. This year's ritual feels like a seasonal closing. This year's ritual feels less like a seasonal closing and more like an extension of the triumphal games themselves. Calpurnia offered a knowing smile, adjusting her pala against the breeze. With all the chariot racing, the theatrical plays, and mass entertainment we've seen over the last month, it certainly blurs together. If the priests hadn't insisted on the traditional dates, the Senate might as well have packaged the Armulistrium directly into your victory games. They both laughed softly, sharing a rare moment of lightheartedness amidst the relentless momentum of Rome's political life. As their laughter subsided, Calpurnia turned her bright brown eyes toward him, a playful curiosity in her voice. Wait, husband, clear something, clear something up for me. During the height of the triumphal celebrations, you didn't sorry. Oh, sorry, let me start over that part, sorry. As their laughter subsided, Calpurnia turned her bright brown eyes toward him, a playful curiosity in her voice. Wait, husband, clear something up for me. During the height of the triumphal celebrations, didn't you order an entire mock naval battle to be fought on a massive artificial lake right in the heart of the Campus Martius? Caesar chuckled, looking up at the bright, warm autumn sky with an exaggerated expression of innocence. Perhaps I did. Though if you ask my accountants in the treasury, they might prefer to pretend I didn't. Caesar smacked his lip. Wait, sorry. Calpurnia smacked her lips, letting out a sharp, amused grunt. Julius, give me a straight answer. Caesar stopped walking and looked at her directly, his expression completely blank for a for a split second before a wary grin broke across his face. I absolutely did, he admitted, and it was magnificent. Calpurnia asked calmly, how did you even do that? Caesar replied, It's called a Naumachia. It's a mock naval battle staged as mass entertainment. Staging would typically occur in a specially dug basin, also known as a Naumachia. Calpurnia chuckled, and she gleefully said, Wonderful, Julius, wonderful. Calpurnia asked, these combatants did use wooden swords, simple shields, and wooden spears and pikes, and bows or crossbows with no arrows, right? Caesar looked at her and gave a dry, small, yet borderline maniacal laugh, even if he wasn't threatening his wife. Caesar asked, you think that? Calpurnia replied, yes. Caesar's chuckle faded, his expression shifting into a more serious, reflective tone. I excavated a massive basin near the Tiber River in the Campus Martius and filled it with water to float actual warships, barimas, triremas, and even massive quinqueremes. Remember the sheer scale of the construction, Calpurnia replied softly. The basin was colossal. Caesar continued, his eyes flashing with the memory of his absolute command. To man the oars and the decks, I gathered 2,000 combatants and 4,000 rowers, all of them prisoners of war. I divided the ships into two rival fleets, the Tyrians and the Egyptians, and staged a brutal life or death clash for the entertainment of the Roman public. Calpurnia looked at him, her brow furrowed in thought. But you call this a mock battle? Perhaps theatrical is a better word, Caesar replied, adjusting the heavy mantle on his shoulder. In the future, I imagine these namashias might be staged with blunted weapons to preserve the men, just as you guessed. But for my triumph, nothing was staged. The two sides fought with true steel until one fleet was completely shattered. By framing the spectacle as an ancient rivalry between Tyre and Egypt, I could celebrate our dominance over foreign lands without shedding Roman blood, all while treating the public to the most expensive and violent theatrical event the world has ever witnessed so far. He paused, looking toward the sprawling architecture of the city. And once the games were over, I had the basin filled back in. Because that marshy, low-lying area of the Campus Martius is prone to stagnant water and pestilence, it had to be drained and leveled immediately to prevent public health hazards. Calpurnia fell silent for a moment, absorbed in the sheer ruthless scale of her husband's ambition. A cold breeze swept past the carriage awnings, and she let out a slightly nervous chuckle to break the tension. Let's meet up with Brutus, shall we? Caesar's formal, disciplined mask slipped back into place. He offered a warm nod, his sharp eyes softening as he smiled at her. You are entirely right, my dear. Let us find Brutus. Chapter 10. Brutus. As the two wandered through the busy venues, Calpurnia asked, what even happens on the Armulistrium again? I know we celebrate it every year, but what specifically even happens again? Caesar replied, it's an annual holiday in the Roman religion, and is a festival in honor of the god of war and agricultural deity, Mars, on October 19th of each year. On this day, the weapons of the soldiers were ritually purified and stored for winter. The army would be assembled and reviewed in the Circus Maximus. Garlanded with flowers, trumpets, tubaea would be played as part of the purification rites. The Romans gathered with their arms and armor on the Aventine Hill and held a procession with torches and sacrificial animals. The dancing priests of Mars, known as the Salian priests, would also have taken part in the ceremony. So Calpurnia asked, What kinds of sacrificial animals are used by the Salians? Caesar paused, pondering before answering. The primary animals used to be sacrificed to Mars would be the suovitaluri. Oh God, how do you say that? Suovitaruli. Oh hell. The suovitaruila. The suovitarulila. I don't even know. However the fuck it's even said. I don't even know how to say that. Traditional Roman purification rites consisted of the sacrifice of a pig, a sheep or ram, and a bull or ox to Mars. After a moment more of wandering through the streets near the stadium, they heard a familiar voice call out, "Caesar! Mr. Caesar!" As Calpurnia and Caesar looked around, Calpurnia gasped excitedly and told her husband, "There he is, Julius," and standing in front of the couple was none other than the politician and orator Marcus Junius Brutus, a very close friend of Caesar, who was almost like a family member to the man. Brutus was 40 years old, possessing a distinct, sharp-jawed, rhombus-shaped face, framed by a head of thick, fluffy black hair. His bright hazel eyes held a discipled focus, and his face was mostly clean-shaven, save for the light, shadow-like beginnings of a well-kept beard. Unlike the traditional civilian toga, Brutus wore a more structured patrician ensemble. Over a high-collared, long-sleeved white tunic shirt, he layered a formal white jacket, which contemplated a heavy, long-sleeved robe skirt that descended cleanly to just above his ankles. The cut of his garments highlighted his broad shoulders and slightly muscular arms. Around his neck, a slightly yet elegant silver necklace rested against the crisp fabric, adding a subtle touch of wealth to his otherwise dignified appearance. He completed the attire with formal, finely stitched brown leather shoes, standing with the quiet posture of a man well accustomed to the courts and the Senate floor. Early in his political career, Brutus opposed Pompey, who was responsible for Brutus's father's death. He was also close to Caesar, yet despite that, Caesar's attempt to evade accountability in the law courts put him at greater odds with his opponents in the Roman elites and the Senate. Brutus eventually came to oppose Caesar and sided with Pompey against Caesar's forces during the Ensurine Civil War. Pompey was defeated at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE, after which Brutus surrendered to Caesar, who granted him amnesty. Brutus approached the couple with a measured, graceful stride. "Good afternoon, Caesar, and to you as well, Lady Calpurnia," he greeted, offering a formal and calm handshake to Caesar first, and then to Calpurnia. He kept his tone respectful but familiar. How has your day been so far, Dictator? And you, Lady Calpurnia?" Caesar chuckled softly, his posture relaxed. "The two of us are doing wonderfully so far." "That is splendid to hear," Brutus answered with a slight incline of his head. He gestured towards the roaring stadium behind him. "Are you here primarily for the opening ceremonies, the chariot racing, or perhaps the animal sacrifices and the ritual purification of the legionaries' weapons before they are stored for the winter?" "We will be here for the entire day. Do not worry," Caesar replied, with a warm laugh. "From the first procession until the final closing ceremonies this evening, we shall remain in and around the Circus Maximus." As his laughter subsided, Caesar glanced around the bustling arcade, his sharp eyes scanning the crowds. "Tell me, Brutus, where are Publius, Servilius, Casca, and Gaius Cassius Longinus? Were they able to make it? Tribune Casca and General Cassius?" Brutus asked to clarify. "The very same," Caesar replied. "They are meant to meet us They are meant to meet us near the main entrance," Brutus explained. Although neither of them has appeared just yet, even though I appeared before you two, all of us are still well ahead of the schedule. They are perfectly on time." It is simply it is simply taken them a few moments longer to navigate the crowds than anticipated. Brutus passed. His expression turned slightly more serious. His expression turned slightly more serious as a thought occurred to him. Tell me, Caesar, did you hear about the incident that occurred during the opening ceremony of your triumphs a few days ago? Caesar's eyes narrowed slightly, the politician in him taken over. Are you referring to the standoff between those two aristocrats and the group of the plebeians? The one where the aristocrats, where the aristocrats tried to disrupt the festivities by tearing down the decorations while aggressively, verbally harassing and throwing things at the crowd? The very same one, Brutus nodded. Well, in short terms, Caesar stated flatly, they have been silenced. Brutus tilted his head, frowning in genuine confusion. Silenced, Caesar? What exactly do you mean by that? They were promptly identified and arrested by a squad of city legionaries shortly after the disturbance. Caesar clarified, his voice smooth and untroubled. The two patricians are currently in the holding cells awaiting their trial. They will face judgments under Roman law tomorrow, on the 20th of October. Brutus shook his head in slight disbelief, a touch of frustration creeping into his voice. Caesar, I am not asking how they were captured. I am asking what exactly drove them to such madness. What sort of fates awaits them at trial? Caesar replied, once again with that same ambiguous tone. They will be removed after the trial, most certainly. The evidence is in favor of the plebeians, not the oligarchs. Brutus scoffed and asked, they are going to be simply put in a minimum secure federal prison camp, or maybe even exiled safely while still retaining minor aristocracy, right, Caesar? Caesar simply stared blankly at Brutus before looking away, almost as if ignoring him, but at the same time, not really. Brutus's face then turned to concern, as he asked one final time, right? Caesar exhaled and looked at Brutus with an assuring face. Brutus, there's nothing to worry about. They'll be fine. He then kindly told Brutus, why don't you go to the main entrance and wait for Cassius and Casca? We'll be there shortly after they arrive. It won't be long before they return. Brutus nodded, his head affirmatively. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry, guys. I skipped a sentence. We'll be there shortly after they arrive. It won't be long before they return. Brutus nodded. Sorry. Oh, wait, hold on. I think I missed the whole last paragraph. Sorry. Like nearly the whole last paragraph. Let me start over. Right, Caesar? Yeah, I'm just gonna start there because I have no idea where I just got lost. Sorry about that, guys. Right, Caesar? Caesar simply stared blankly at Brutus before looking away, almost as if ignoring him, but at the same time, not really. Brutus's face then turned to concern as he asked one final time, right? Caesar exhaled and looked at Brutus with an assuring face. Brutus, there's nothing to worry about. They'll be fine. He then kindly told Brutus, why don't you go to the main entrance and wait for Cassius and Casca? We'll be there shortly after they arrive. It won't be long before they return. Brutus nodded his head affirmatively, his tense expression relaxing slightly. Understood, Caesar. I will head away into the main entrance now, and make sure I am there to guide Cassius and Casca when they arrive. Caesar smiled warmly, offering a final nod of approval. I appreciate your effort, Brutus. We shall see you all inside the stadium shortly. All right, yeah, I'm sorry that I got a little lost. Reading this so far. Oops, don't worry about that. Yeah, I'm sorry that I got a little lost during like reading this, but we'll stop here for now, though. We'll stop here for now. Stay safe, everyone. Bye bye.